Our first speaker this evening is Greg Poor from Bioengineering.
Thank you for the introduction. I recognize that these are difficult times for many. So before beginning my talk, I want to invite everyone to do something with me. For the next few seconds, I want you to think of the people who have helped you become who you are. For me, my grandmother, shown here, was one of these people. She spent months with my sister and I every year for nearly 20 years, from my birth to the start of college. And then something tragic happened. Halfway through my first year of college, my grandmother was suddenly diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She had no symptoms. She had no warning. She tried therapy, but it failed just a few weeks later. And just as sudden as it came, just 33 days after her initial diagnosis, I found myself mourning her death. This tremendously painful and sudden loss of my grandmother catapulted me into cancer research and medicine. It is the reason why I am a medical student at UCSD. But the more that I searched, even in medicine, the fewer answers that I found. Even with the best therapies, the survival rate of pancreatic cancer was just 5%. And it really wasn't until my second year of medical school that I began to see hope on the horizon. By complete accident, researchers in Israel discovered that microbes, non-human things, were inhabiting over 75% of pancreatic cancers. And they were actually likely responsible for their deadliness. This slide shows several examples. Cancer cells are fluorescently stained in blue and microbes are in red. Perhaps most astonishing, though, is that these microbes were actually eating away the chemotherapy that patients received, making them resistant to treatment. And the kinds of diagnostic procedures physicians were doing to see if they had cancer were introducing these microbes into their cancers. Like a sniper looking tirelessly for his target, I finally found a new perspective for my questions about cancer in these crosshairs. Cancer itself was not sterile. Now, we have over 100 trillion microbes that live on us and in us. For comparison, that's 1,000 times more than there are stars in the Milky Way, or 3 times the number of human cells on your body. In essence, you are a modern-day centaur with you and your microbes. And yet, for decades, virtually every single cancer has been treated as a sterile disease. Joining hands with researcher Rob Knight at UCSD, I made it my goal to explore microbial DNA in over 30 cancer types and across 10,000 patients to see if microbes could be found in most major cancer types in the human body. The results, which were published last month in Nature, suggest an entirely new class of cancer diagnostics, where we can actually diagnose human cancers using microbial features in both tumors and blood. Moreover, these microbial-based cancer diagnostics can often be more sensitive and specific than existing human-based cancer diagnostics, meaning that we could potentially find and treat cancer earlier. Additionally, to reach people in the clinic, like my grandmother, we have started a company to bring this technology to them. Together, we are building a new era of microbial-based cancer diagnostics, and I hope that it will save people from the pain that my grandmother and family had to go through. And until it does, there's good work to do.
Thanks so much for your talk, Greg. That was really interesting and very personal, and we appreciate you taking time to share. We would love to get to know you a little bit better. Could you tell us about something that you have on your bucket list?
So I'm a triathlete, and I did my first Ironman last year. It is on my bucket list to do my first 100-mile marathon, which is also known as an ultramarathon.
Oh my goodness, an ultramarathon. Do you have a particular location where you'd like to run that at?
Well, there's a race in Colorado that is very famous for going over mountainous terrain as you do it. So it's definitely a challenge, but it's something that I look forward to seeing how far I can push my body.
That's awesome. Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Greg. We enjoyed hearing from you tonight. And yeah, we wish you the best as you continue on in your graduate student career and with your research.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks.
All right, our next speaker this evening is Mingji Chen from mathematics.
Thanks for the introduction. Fermat's last theorem is probably the most well-known problem in number theory. Fermat studied this equation a to the n plus b to the n equal to c to the n for n greater than 2 and claimed that it had no solution in positive integers. This conjecture remained open for more than 350 years until a solution was finally found by Andrew Wiles. This example represents one of the main objects in the study of number theory, that is, finding integer solutions of equations. It has always been difficult because among all the possible solutions we have, we don't know if there are any integer solutions or not, and if there is, how many are there? So is there any strategy for identifying these integer solutions, such mysterious and precious integer solutions, which are like gold to us? Wait, gold? How do people find gold? Imagine that we are mining gold along a river. We start with a big chunk of mud containing gold, and then use finer and finer nets to sieve it until we have only gold left. Miraculously, mathematician Min-Hyung Kim constructed nets to sieve integer solutions, and this is now known as Kim's method. One of the main difficulties one encounters when trying to build these Kim's nets explicitly is the computation of an integration called comma integration, and this integration is what my research focuses on. Currently, the only known strategy for computing these integrations is by following the original construction step by step. But this is conceptually hard and has the problem of getting much more complicated when equation gets larger. Just like there are different rivers in the world where you can do gold mining with possibly different strategies, equations are also divided into different types. So it is natural to ask, is there any type of equation whose nets are easier to build? The answer is yes. My collaborators and I studied an equation related to an object called modular curves. We realized that there are some special properties about these equations which enabled us to compute their corresponding integrations in a totally different way. Our new method is conceptually easy and has the potential to handle certain complicated equations better than the general method. These equations of modular curves encode significant arithmetic data. Solving them will lead to the resolution of a conjecture which remained open for several decades. Hopefully, this time it won't take mathematicians another 350 years. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Minji, for sharing your research. It sounds really complex and really like something that could help us understand complex problems and finding solutions to them. So I think that way of thinking is really important. I'm so glad you're exploring it. Could you tell us a little bit more about you and maybe something that most people don't know about you?
So before I become a math major, I spent in my undergraduate half a year studying Chinese literature. And after that, I spent 1 year studying economy. Probably many people know I majored in math, I studied number theory, but they didn't know that I changed my major twice before entering this area.
Wow, that's awesome. I think it's always a journey to find, the right area and the right passion that you really want to spend a whole lot of time studying. So it's a journey for everyone.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing, and we wish you all the best as you continue on in your program and continue doing your research.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Elliot Weiss from Scripps Institution of Oceanography.
Thank you, Shauna, for the introduction. Aw, drat! My face is on fire and my skin is blistering, is what I might say if I forgot to lather up with sunscreen at the beach last weekend. It's also what hundreds of tourists may say when they arrive in Hawaii next year, only to find out that the sunscreens that they've packed in their luggage have been banned. Wait a minute, a tourist hotspot like Hawaii banning sunscreens? It sounds counterintuitive. Why would they do something like that? Well, Hawaii has done this because research has shown that some of the chemical compounds present in commercial sunscreens can have toxic effects on the organisms living in coral reef environments. As the sunscreens leach off of tourist skins and into the ocean's waters, these compounds can really add up. It's estimated that somewhere between 6,000 and 14,000 tons of sunscreen enter coral reef areas each year. Now, if we hold this thought and look to the image behind me, or on your screen, it may surprise you to find out that the sunscreen-lathered tourists on the beach aren't the only sunbathers in this photo. If you look to the water, you may notice a greenish hue and some shadowy patches. These colorations are from algae, organisms ranging in size from meters long, such as giant kelp, to microscopic and invisible to the naked eye. Algae rely on sunlight as a way to produce energy, while simultaneously producing almost half the oxygen that we breathe. However, while algae are dependent on sunlight, they aren't immune to the harmful effects of UV radiation that come with it, just like the tourists on the beach. However, unlike the tourists on the beach, algae can't just hop out of the ocean and walk down the street to the local market when they need some more. So they have had to evolve their own coping mechanisms to deal with UV radiation. One of which is the ability to create their very own sunscreen molecules. In my research, I'm currently profiling a wide variety of algae, collected all the way from the frigid waters of Antarctica to the warm, salty tropics, looking for novel sunscreen compounds within them. Once I've identified interesting types of algae, I can then look to their genomes to try to figure out which genes are responsible for creating these sunscreen compounds. I can then tinker with these genes in the laboratory so that I can try to produce them on a larger level so that one day they might be used in a human topical sunscreen. By turning to the natural environment as a source of inspiration, I hope to reduce the amount of chemicals ending up where they simply don't belong. And therefore, this research is impactful on two levels. Firstly, by creating alternative ways for people to protect themselves from UV radiation and therefore skin cancer, which is responsible for more than 15,000 deaths annually. And secondly, this research aims to reduce our impact on the natural environment. I hope that tourists will be able to relax a little more on their next vacation, knowing that the way they screen just got a little more green. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elliot. That was lovely and exciting, and I really appreciate you taking some time to tell us about your research. It sounds like it's a topic that's going to keep being very important and a problem that's really important for us to solve as we look towards the future. Tell me a little bit more about you, and maybe is there a particular place or item on your bucket list that you'd like to share?
Oh, well, I am very into rock climbing, and I would really love to make it out to Zion National Park one day to try to climb a big wall there. That's always been something I've been interested in doing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree. I think I've only seen photos of Zion, and it's definitely up there on the list of places to get to real quick. So awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking time tonight, and we appreciate hearing your story.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Our speaker now is Andy Zhao from Materials Science and Engineering.
If you know any grad students who have recently got really into baking bread, it means that their research is going terribly and you should probably check in on how they're doing. I started baking bread in my second year at UCSD. I was trying to build an oven that could get to 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, melt salts, and measure its thermal conductivity. And after 2 years, everything was broken, especially me, but I found solace in experimenting with flour, water, salt, and yeast. to bake bread. And it was a more forgiving and nourishing reminder that I could still do some kind of science. And compare that to my first year at UCSD, where I was really young and gung-ho about overthrowing the fossil fuel industry. And here's my elevator pitch from that first year. Enough sunlight strikes the Earth's surface every 2 hours to power the world for an entire year. Solar panels provide electricity cheaper than any form of fossil fuel. So why isn't everything powered by solar? It's because the sun sets every night and batteries are still far too expensive to store enough energy for an entire city. A cheaper way to store energy is molten salt. This is Ivanpah, right outside Las Vegas, where 10,000 mirrors reflect and concentrate sunlight to the top of a tower to heat up molten salt. The hot salt is stored in these giant containers, and heat is extracted at nighttime to power turbines and generate electricity. And it powers about 100,000 homes. You can think of it like a thermos. In the morning, you fill up your thermos with hot coffee. And later in the day, when you need a boost in energy, the hot coffee is there waiting. And that's usually where my elevator pitch ends, because my research looks something more like this. I sit kind of like this and I stare at these dots all day and I ask myself, how fast can you extract heat from molten salt to generate electricity? And it turns out there's 15 different answers depending on who you ask, because this large spread of data is caused by convection at high temperature. The same thing happens when you boil water. There's this bubbling and moving of water. And as any good baker knows, the amount of convection changes depending on the oven. So that is what is fudging the real speed of heat in these molten salts. So the accepted value is just to assume this very low and slow thermal conductivity in these molten salts. So I've spent the last 3 years developing a new technique to remove the error of convection to more accurately measure thermal conductivity. So I've actually found that it's 15% higher than previously thought. So to give you a better intuition of thermal conductivity, imagine opening a metal doorknob. The metal feels cold because it's extracting heat from your hand very quickly, compared to the wooden door, which has a low thermal conductivity. So it feels at room temperature. So what my data shows is you can actually extract heat more efficiently from molten salt than previously thought. So when you're redesigning these molten salt solar thermal plants, you can make them smaller and save money when you build them, on the order of about $2 million. So to sum everything up, I've spent 3 years consuming bread and converting it into these 13 data points, these dots, and about $2 million in savings. Thank you for your attention.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Andy, for sharing your research with all of us. I took a trip to Las Vegas about a month ago, and I believe I passed this solar field that you talk about and that you showed the picture of, and it was amazing. And I definitely was thinking of you as I passed that field, and I was like, I think this is what he's talking about.
Yeah,
so
it's actually an insane sight to behold. It's like kind of like the Eye of Sauron, because this giant tower like comes out of the earth and like this giant, really super bright spot.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it was really fascinating. So, so you mentioned baking bread, and I'm curious.
Yeah, a lot of people are starting to do that these days.
So in your free time, besides baking bread, tell us about what else you like to spend time doing.
Yeah, so literally in the questionnaire it asks, what is your favorite thing to do? So it is, part of it is breaking bread, but my personal favorite thing to do in my, like a free Saturday morning is I usually brew a cup of coffee from Bird Rock Roasters or Cafe Moto, and I just spend the morning reading a novel. So I think I'm reading this book right now, The Overstory by Richard Powers. It's about trees. And I think Kiske is going to talk about trees later, but yeah, I just like getting lost in a really good novel, drinking coffee, waiting for my bread to rise. So awesome.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing. It was great to hear from you, and best of luck as you continue your studies.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jim Short from Theater and Dance.
Thank you for the introduction, Shauna. Imagine you're walking down the street, your feet firmly planted on the pavement beneath you, and you look up. 25 stories above, a pair of tightrope walkers meticulously balance on a wire, one misstep from a fatal fall. Now, while these daredevils risk life and limb to redefine what is possible, my research focuses on those below, the crowds that gather to experience risk as spectators. This risk for audience members can best be understood in terms of what they might experience in a given performance. What might they see, hear, or feel that might irrevocably change their lives or change their perception of the world around them? I've been wondering why, in this era when we can pick and choose from an infinite array of entertainment, are we still drawn to the live event when risk is a major factor? In order to understand this risk experienced by spectators, my theater research draws from a theory called edgework. As shown here, edgework describes all the actions that take place on the fringes of everyday normative life that push society to redefine what is possible. For instance, while we here in this Zoom chat might consider a hike up Torrey Pines as a relaxing Saturday, those that attempt to summit Mount Everest engage in edgework, pushing their bodies to the limit at great personal risk. My research applies the way that we understand this risk on the fringes of society onto the spectator, who play a key role in the risk-making event. Performers who engage with risk and unpredictability often do so not just for their own benefit, but to fill a need in society. While not everyone is willing to climb up on that tightrope, we might still crave the departure from our over-regulated and structured everyday lives. These spectators then rely on the actors as proxy, enabling all of us to engage in risky business secondhand. My research of spectatorial risk is vital as it offers a new way of analyzing performance that prioritizes the people instead of just a few artistic celebrities like Shakespeare or Evel Knievel. It pushes us to understand how performance, whether that's on the stage, as music, or in film, is driven by our need to experience that which is new and unpredictable. Furthermore, spectatorial risk can be applied to creating effective communication strategies. It can help anyone, from artists to scientists to politicians, devise new strategies for engaging and exciting audiences. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Jim, for sharing your research with us. It's really interesting to learn from you. You spend a lot of time studying people and studying societies and how we interact. And I'm curious, in your life, tell us about a person who's made an impact on your life.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think one of the more formative people early in my growing, so probably like high school, college period, was a director I had a long time ago. Just so full of life, so full of energy, just very passionate about helping others, passionate about the work he was doing. I ended up finding out, maybe 12 months after the fact that he had passed. That whole time he had been dealing with terminal cancer. And it was really a sort of awe-inspiring moment to me of someone that I was close to who was living life with such passion, even though they had such, personal misfortune. So I've always thought about that as a sort of, inspiration, pushing me to sort of live every day to the fullest.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing. I know having people in our lives that inspire us and motivate us can be so important. And it sounds like he was quite the remarkable individual. So thanks for sharing. Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing how your research continues as you go through your program here at UC San Diego, and I'll look forward to learning more from you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jem.
Our next speaker is Lim Leong from psychology.
Thank you. Decades of psychological research have argued human decision-making is biased and irrational. Not you, of course, other people. So how can we help them make better decisions? Default options. The default refers to what gets implemented in the absence of active choice. Defaults don't change the availability of options, nor do they prevent you from choosing what you want. Yet people are lazy, and they tend to stick with whichever option is set as the default. So by making subtle changes to the choice context, we can help steer this cognitive bias toward better outcomes. This simple intervention has been applied to numerous domains, including retirement saving, organ donation, and internet privacy. For example, people are more likely to be organ donors in countries where being an organ donor is the default. This conventional approach, however, neglects two important aspects. First, the research has focused mostly on adults, but what about children? Are they influenced by defaults? And second, is choosing the default option actually stupid and irrational? People might prefer the default because they perceive it as an implicit recommendation. Policymakers don't set defaults at random, so people might draw the intelligent social inference that the option they set as the default is the one they want you to choose. In my study, I test whether children are influenced by defaults and whether they perceive them as implicit endorsements. In our design, we present children a choice between two videos to watch, a cartoon video about birds and a teaching video about meerkats. Our only manipulation is which video we set up as the default. By simply changing the preset video from the cartoon to the teaching video, we saw a dramatic increase in the percentage of children who end up watching the teaching video. Furthermore, this behavior is driven by their inferences. Children were much more likely to infer that the experimenter wanted them to watch the teaching video when that video was the default. These results suggest children not only stick with default options, but they also have the remarkable ability to read minds, to infer what others recommend based on a subtle cue like the default. So how can we apply this behavioral insight to make a difference in the world? Take childhood obesity as an example. Policymakers can set salad as the default rather than fries, or to make milk the default drink rather than soda. By applying this simple yet effective intervention, we can preserve children's autonomy to choose while nudging them to make better choices regarding their health, wealth, and happiness. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Lim. It was really exciting to hear about your research. It sounds like you spend a lot of time engaged in really important research, and I appreciate you taking time to share with us today.
Thank you.
We'd love to learn a little bit more about you. Could you tell us something that might be on a bucket list for you?
I forgot what I wrote for that one. Can you ask me a different one?
Sure, of course. Maybe talk about a favorite thing that you do in free time.
Oh, sure. When I'm not daydreaming about being on Broadway, you can usually find me either asleep, with Westworld playing in the background and Milano cookies on the side.
Milano cookies, all right. I like it. Any particular flavor, Milano
I
cookies?
usually go with double chocolate or mint.
Yum. Double chocolate sounds amazing. It must be dinner time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Lim. We
you.
appreciate you participating and wish you the best of luck as you continue on in your research.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Julianne Sanpianato from Nanoengineering.
So, who are you when you're hungry? I am definitely not myself, but that's okay. You know why? Because when we are hungry, our blood glucose sugar levels drop super low, while our stress levels goes sky high. This is why sometimes we are a little bit grumpy or angry. But what if you were like this all the time? How could anybody tell that you're just hungry or feeling pain? Unfortunately, this is what happens with most of the newborns. They are born with very low glucose levels. So the doctors, they need to check their blood all the time. And all this pain, plus their low glucose levels, makes their stress levels constantly high. While this condition is only temporary for them, they do get better as they grow older. For babies born with type 1 diabetes, these high stress levels may follow them throughout all their childhood, and the number of kids with diabetes have been only increasing. In a group of 10 people with type 1 diabetes, at least 3 of them are less than 5 years old. And then being a parent is hard enough. Now, imagine that your kid has diabetes. You cannot rest, not even when they are asleep. Actually, this is one of the most dangerous hours. If their glucose drops during sleep, they may go into a coma and never come back. So, as a wearable sensors researcher, it is my job to try and bring some comfort for these babies and also parents. This is why in our lab, we just combine a glucose sensor with a pacifier. We took a regular pacifier so we could collect the saliva, sending it to a sensing chamber where all the glucose in saliva is converted to electrical signal that you can read in your cell phone or in your computer. The greatest thing is that saliva is basically filtered blood. All the information that you have in blood, you can also find it in saliva. And now we can monitor blood glucose using only saliva. And here you can see the real thing. Here is the glucose strip, the sensor that we develop in our lab. You just need to replace it once a day. All the electronics responsible for reading and sending out the information that we also develop in our lab. It's very small, it's the size of a quarter coin. And the good thing is that the device has been already tested successfully in real PhD students. But right now, we just started a collaboration with a pediatrician at UC San Francisco, and then we are gonna test the pacifiers with the newborns. And then I just hope that soon enough, we can bring some peace of mind for these tiny little guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julianne, for sharing your research. It sounds like you're working on some really important problems and solutions, and it is clear that you're very excited about your research and very motivated. So thanks for sharing.
Thank you. I'm very happy to share. Proud.
Yeah. Awesome. So tell us maybe something that most people might not know about you.
Oh, yeah, I love drawing, sometimes I'm just at the lab moving my pen and then people come to see what I'm drawing you. I love cartoons. So if I'm looking at you too much, I'm drawing you. Be careful.
Well, that's funny. I love it. Is there like a favorite character that you like to draw?
Not really, I like drawing people. So I find the shapes and different personalities super drawable. I mean, I like putting you on paper. I think
very cool. That's awesome. I love it.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking time to be here tonight, and best of luck as you continue in your program and continue doing this great research.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, our next speaker is Haleh Yazdi from psychology.
Thank you, Shauna. When I was 3 years old, my family moved to a rural city in the South called Commerce, Texas. And it didn't take long for me to realize that my Iranian family didn't exactly blend in with the other families there. This is because early in life, children recognize similarities and differences between themselves and others on a variety of traits, like gender and skin tone, and they use this information to categorize individuals into preferred in-groups and disliked outgroups. This process over time can lead to discrimination against outgroup members, which is something my family experienced. Now, popular theory in psychology is that children operate on the belief that what's similar to me is good and what's different from me is bad. But almost all of the research in this area has been conducted in Western societies, leaving it unknown whether children across the globe develop prejudices in this way. My research aims to answer this question by taking a more global perspective towards studying childhood prejudice. Take Iran, for instance. Iranian children know that they're very different from Americans and that their country has ongoing tensions with the US. But they also know that the US has high status globally. So how might these children weigh similarity against other factors when deciding who they like? To answer this question, I asked 7 to 12-year-old children in Iran how much they wanted to be friends with members of 4 different groups. Iranian children from their own school, so their in-group, Iranian children from a different school, so an outgroup that differed on one dimension, Arab children, a group who is similar to them with regards to language, religion, and proximity, but one that they've historically had conflict with, and American children, a group who they're very different from, have ongoing political conflict with, but a group that has high status globally. What I found was that Iranian children express the most desire to be friends with American children. In fact, so much so that they rated them more favorably than their own group. Surprisingly, children also expressed the desire to trust and be loyal to Americans. On the other hand, Iranian children expressed the least desire to be friends with Arab children, a group who they perceived as having very low status. What these findings show us is that children will welcome friendship with a group that is very different from their own. But it's our responsibility as adults to encourage these friendships and to teach children that all groups should have equal status. Children are our best hope for eliminating prejudice early in life and promoting better, more peaceful relationships across borders. My research brings us one step closer to a world where we see one another as equals. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Hale, for sharing your research talk. It sounds really interesting and really important, so thank you for doing that work. I'm hoping you can share a little bit more about you and what is something that you like to do when you have some free time?
I really like to travel in my free time. I like to travel locally and internationally, and I've been lucky to be able to do it for my research. My research has taken me to Iran and India and Tanzania, and that's been awesome. And I also like to travel in my free time. It's the best way to learn about new perspectives and new cultures, and so it's my favorite thing.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite place, or do you always like going to new places?
I like the thrill of going to a new place, but there's always places that I feel like you can explore more. And France is one of those, as well as Italy. You can always explore the food in Italy more.
I agree. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us tonight, and best of luck as you continue in your program and keep doing your research. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Daryl Brown from Electrical and Computer Engineering.
Communication is important for all life on Earth. Speech, in particular, is a fundamental part of the human experience. Now imagine if you're unable to speak, unable to move, literally trapped in your body, incapable of telling your loved ones how you feel, or even letting your doctors know whether or not the medications they're giving you are even working. This is a reality for many people across the globe, and it's what's known as locked-in syndrome. My research seeks to help these individuals to once again share their thoughts. Now you may ask, how is something like this even possible? Well, speech is a motor process. The same way that I can move my hand is the same way that I can speak, with my brain telling the muscles of my body what to do, similar to a musician playing a cello. Only in the case of a person with locked-in syndrome, the musician's playing, only the strings are missing, and no sound can come out. Our strategy is to look at the musician's fingers, or more specifically, the brain's activity. However, the human brain is much more complicated than one single musician. It's more of a full-on orchestra. And so we're looking at a much simpler model. Birds. Birds are one of the few species on Earth capable of learned vocal behavior. And they learn how to sing the same way we learn how to speak, from their parents. Now, my typical day, besides for cleaning up bird poop, involves putting these little guys in our lab's custom recording studio, allowing them to perform all day long, simultaneously recording both their vocal performance and their brain's activity. Using this data, we were able to develop an algorithm that can predict not only what, but when the bird is going to sing. Currently, we are working on implementing this into a real-time prosthesis device that can predict and produce the bird's song, such that if we were to mute our birds and implant our device, they'll be none the wiser. They will think that our prosthetic was them themselves singing. And the insights learned from creating this device will give us better understanding of how to do something similar in humans with locked-in syndrome, stroke, traumatic brain injury. Well, this is huge. Prior to our work, there was no animal model to do this type of research. And so we've placed all of our algorithms, tools, and code online and freely available for any scientist that wishes to reproduce our work and add to the literature. Now, you may ask, why would we do this? Well, as an engineer, I believe it is our job to make the world a better place. In a world where everyone has a voice is a good place to start. And we'll get there much faster with as many hands on deck as possible, so that together, one day we may allow a person with locked-in syndrome to once again tell their loved ones, I love you.
Thanks so much for sharing, Daryl. It was really exciting to hear about your research, and it sounds like it's something that's very much a passion for you. I can tell by the way you talk about it. Tell us a little bit more about you, maybe an item on your bucket list, something you really want to do.
I guess there's two in particular that I really want to travel, but I feel like that's really, everyone wants to travel. I think one bucket list, I would love to be, like, as a side hustle, to be a science communicator. Like Bill Nye was like my hero as a kid. So doing things like Grad Slam is definitely something that close to that childhood passion of explaining how cool science is to everyone.
Definitely. I love it. Well, you're very good at it. So I'm sure we can find lots of ways for you to do that in your role as a grad student here at UC San Diego. So excellent. Well, thanks so much for taking the time tonight. And it was great to hear from you, and best of luck as you continue on in the program. Does anyone else have any other thoughts or items to say? I think that's pretty much concludes our time together.
I just want to say I think it's really really cool the way you've managed to take the things that you had originally planned and reformat them and retool them into this environment. If you had come to the Writing Hub for any kind of prep, we had stressed a lot the importance of the genre and thinking about how weird, excuse my dog, it was so weird, and now this is a totally new genre, and I think it's great that y'all just embrace that challenge with a whole heart, and I'm really heartened to see everybody still doing their presentations and learning the lessons. Yeah, I'm just really heartened by the whole thing. That's all.
I agree. I am so proud of all of you and so thankful that you took this risk to deliver your presentations in this, like Erica said, totally new genre, totally new space. I think you're building skills and may not even realize it at the time, right? But now you have this under your belt and something you can lean on and reflect on and use as you go forward in the world. So thank you all for taking the time, and congratulations. I know this was not the Grad Slam we all envisioned when we first started on this journey, but if you are still students next year, we absolutely invite you to come back and participate in Grad Slam again. All right, well, without further ado,
thank you.
Thanks,
was a
everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great job, everyone.
Great job.
Thank you.